When Robert Steinberg became New York's most trusted jewelry appraiser, wealthy collectors relied on him to authenticate their precious stones. But when his heroin addiction and insurance fraud schemes consumed him, he began switching real diamonds for fakes and murdering witnesses who discovered his crimes, turning jewelry appraisals into deadly deception schemes. Before starting the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Now let's get back to the video. The glittering lights of Manhattan's Diamond District reflected off storefront windows as Robert Steinberg arranged his precision instruments and magnification equipment for what would become the most dangerous jewelry appraisal of his 24-year career as New York's most respected gemologist and precious stone specialist. At 56 years old, Robert had established himself as Manhattan's premier jewelry expert, specializing in high-value appraisals and estate jewelry authentication that attracted wealthy collectors, insurance companies, and auction houses who valued his expertise in identifying rare gems and his reputation for providing absolutely accurate valuations of the world's most precious stones. Robert's jewelry appraisal office occupied a secure location in Manhattan's prestigious Diamond District, featuring state-of-the-art gemological equipment, climate-controlled storage vaults, and private consultation rooms where clients could discuss their most valuable jewelry collections without concern for security breaches or confidentiality violations. His clientele included international diamond dealers requiring certification for million-dollar transactions, estate attorneys handling inheritance disputes involving precious stone collections, and insurance companies whose policies demanded precise valuations from certified gemological experts. The interior of Robert's appraisal office reflected his mastery of gemological science and his understanding of wealthy clients' expectations for both expertise and absolute security, featuring walls displaying certifications from prestigious gemological institutes, photographs of record-breaking gem discoveries, and testimonials from grateful clients whose jewelry investments had been protected through his accurate appraisals and authentication services. His equipment cases contained precision instruments worth hundreds of thousands of dollars and security credentials that emphasized his trusted status among New York's most exclusive jewelry trade networks. But beneath Robert's reputation for gemological excellence lay a dangerous combination of heroin addiction, systematic fraud operations, and calculated murder that had transformed his appraisal services into criminal enterprises, where threatening clients and suspicious investigators met their fate through gem-switching schemes and witness elimination operations. "Good morning, Robert," said Helena Rothschild, his 10 o'clock appointment, and a 71-year-old art collector whose inherited jewelry collection required comprehensive appraisal for insurance purposes following her husband's death. Helena had brought a collection worth over $8 million, including several historically significant diamonds that required Robert's expertise for authentication and valuation. She had recently noticed discrepancies in previous appraisals and had begun questioning Robert's explanations about market fluctuations and certification updates that he claimed affected the value of her most precious stones. "Good morning, Mrs. Rothschild," Robert replied with the gemological authority and precious stone expertise that had made him legendary among New York's jewelry collectors, who viewed him as both scientist and treasure guardian, capable of authenticating the world's rarest gems while providing absolute security for their most valuable possessions. "I've prepared the specialized equipment for examining your collection today, and I can assure you that each piece will receive the most thorough analysis possible to ensure accurate insurance valuations and proper documentation." Helena had become Robert's most dangerous client, not because of her demanding appraisal requirements or her collection's extraordinary value, but because of her recent discovery of suspicious substitutions and her growing awareness of the fraud operation that Robert had been conducting while supposedly providing legitimate gemological authentication services to New York's wealthy collectors. What Helena didn't know was that Robert had been systematically defrauding clients and murdering witnesses for over 5 years, using his gemological expertise and access to precious stone collections to switch authentic gems with sophisticated fakes while eliminating anyone who discovered his criminal substitution operations. Robert's transformation from respected gemologist to calculating killer had begun 7 years earlier, when his prescription opioid addiction had escalated from legitimate pain management following a workplace injury to daily dependency on heroin and other street drugs that consumed his substantial appraisal income and forced him into desperate relationships with organized crime figures who controlled New York's drug distribution networks and jewelry theft operations. His addiction had grown to cost over $800 per day, while his access to the world's most valuable gems had provided perfect opportunities for conducting sophisticated substitution fraud that generated millions in profits through coordination with criminal fencing networks. Faced with increasing pressure from drug suppliers and potential exposure by suspicious clients, Robert had begun using his gemological expertise to conduct systematic fraud operations, replacing authentic precious stones with nearly perfect synthetic duplicates, while coordinating with criminal organizations who provided the sophisticated fake gems and purchased the stolen authentic stones for international black market sales. His criminal activities had escalated when several clients had discovered evidence of gem substitution and had threatened to report their suspicions to law enforcement agencies, investigating jewelry fraud patterns targeting New York's wealthy collectors and estate settlements. Robert had murdered his first victim, a prominent collector who had detected synthetic diamond substitutions, by injecting her with a lethal dose of heroin during what appeared to be a routine appraisal consultation about gem authentication procedures and insurance documentation. The success of his first murder had convinced Robert that eliminating suspicious clients and threatening investigators was both necessary for protecting his substitution operation and extremely profitable when combined with sophisticated gem fraud that could generate millions in profits while avoiding detection by standard gemological examinations. Over the following 5 years, Robert had murdered 11 additional individuals using various methods that took advantage of his gemological knowledge, his access to private jewelry collections during vulnerable appraisal sessions, and his ability to stage deaths as drug overdoses or medical emergencies that occurred during high-stress estate settlements and insurance evaluations. His victims had been carefully selected based on their discovery of his fraud activities, their potential cooperation with authorities, and their possession of particularly valuable gems that provided maximum profit opportunities for substitution and theft. His victims had included Dr. Patricia Williams, a forensic gemologist who had discovered evidence of systematic substitution and whose laboratory consultation had resulted in fatal heroin overdose disguised as workplace accident with laboratory chemicals. Jennifer Martinez, a wealthy collector who had reported suspicious gem replacements and whose private appraisal had ended in fatal poisoning from modified jewelry cleaning solutions. And David Foster, a federal jewelry fraud investigator who had been tracking substitution patterns and whose gemological consultation had resulted in fatal exposure to concentrated fentanyl, disguised as gemological testing chemical accident. Robert, I need to discuss some serious concerns about jewelry fraud and reports of gem substitution activities connected to your appraisal services, said Detective Lisa Rodriguez of the Manhattan District Attorney's White Collar Crime Division, as she arrived at Robert's office carrying warrants to inspect his equipment and interview him about suspicious activities. Detective Rodriguez specialized in investigating sophisticated fraud operations and had developed expertise in recognizing patterns of gem substitution and jewelry theft that exploited appraisal services and collectors' trust in certified gemological experts. Detective Rodriguez's investigation represented an existential threat to Robert's criminal operation, as her law enforcement expertise and access to jewelry fraud databases could expose the systematic substitution operations and connect him to multiple suspicious deaths during gemological consultations and appraisal services. Of course, Detective Rodriguez, Robert replied, though he felt the familiar surge of heroin withdrawal anxiety and criminal desperation that accompanied any official scrutiny of his gemological operations by law enforcement officers who possessed the training and resources to detect evidence of gem substitution and systematic murder disguised as drug overdoses or laboratory accidents. Gemological integrity and client security are always my highest priorities, and I want to cooperate with any investigation that might help protect collectors and ensure that appraisal services operate according to all applicable professional standards and legal requirements. Detective Rodriguez consulted detailed reports from jewelry fraud investigators and suspicious death analysts that showed patterns of gem substitution and client deaths that suggested systematic criminal activity rather than random jewelry theft or legitimate gemological accidents during routine appraisal consultations. Robert, I've been investigating reports of jewelry fraud and gem substitution that appear to be connected to collections that you've appraised or authenticated, Detective Rodriguez said with the investigative precision that had made her successful in solving complex fraud cases. 11 individuals who were clients of your gemological appraisal business have died under suspicious circumstances, with several of these deaths occurring immediately after the victims had discovered evidence of gem substitution or had expressed concerns about discrepancies in their jewelry valuations during your appraisal services. The detective's identification of the substitution patterns and her recognition of the timing correlation between fraud discoveries and client deaths confirmed Robert's worst fears that his criminal activities had been analyzed and connected to his systematic elimination of suspicious collectors and exploitation of gemological access for organized jewelry fraud operations. Robert's response was swift and deadly, as he realized that eliminating Detective Rodriguez was essential for protecting his criminal enterprise and preventing exposure of his systematic fraud and murder operations. Detective Rodriguez, I think there may be some misunderstanding about the complex nature of gemological analysis and the unfortunate reality that high-stress situations involving valuable jewelry can sometimes lead to medical emergencies despite proper safety protocols, Robert said, while discreetly reaching for a modified gemological microscope that he had weaponized to deliver concentrated carfentanil through aerosol release activated by the microscope's lighting system for emergency elimination of law enforcement threats. Perhaps we could discuss these concerns in my examination room, where I can demonstrate the gemological procedures that might explain these tragic coincidences. Professional gem analysis involves complex technical processes that might appear suspicious to those unfamiliar with advanced gemological equipment and authentication procedures. Detective Rodriguez agreed to examine Robert's gemological equipment, not realizing that the appraiser was leading her to a soundproof examination room where previous murders had been committed and where Robert planned to kill her using his weaponized microscope that would release fatal carfentanil through what would appear to be accidental exposure to gemological chemicals. Robert's plan involved convincing Detective Rodriguez to examine specific gems while explaining authentication procedures, then activating his modified microscope to release carfentanil that would cause rapid respiratory failure while appearing to be accidental chemical exposure from gemological analysis equipment rather than deliberate murder by an appraiser protecting his substitution and fraud operations. But Robert's carefully planned murder of the detective was about to be prevented by the unexpected arrival of federal agents who had been investigating heroin trafficking networks and had identified connections to his gemological business. Special Agent Jennifer Walsh of the DEA's Organized Crime Division had been conducting a comprehensive investigation into heroin trafficking and addiction-related fraud that exploited legitimate luxury service businesses to facilitate drug distribution and eliminate potential witnesses to criminal activities. Agent Walsh specialized in investigating drug-related luxury goods fraud and had developed expertise in tracking criminal gemologists and jewelry professionals who were used to launder drug proceeds while conducting systematic elimination of threats to trafficking networks. The federal investigation had been initiated by reports from multiple international jewelry trade organizations and luxury goods regulators who had noticed patterns of suspicious gem transactions and drug-related deaths that suggested organized criminal networks were using gemological services to launder drug money while eliminating potential witnesses through sophisticated drug poisoning methods disguised as laboratory accidents. Agent Walsh had been conducting surveillance of Robert's drug procurement activities and gemological operations and had documented evidence of systematic heroin use, involvement in jewelry fraud, and suspicious patterns of client deaths that suggested his gemological expertise was being used for organized criminal activity rather than legitimate appraisal services. "Robert Steinberg, I'm Special Agent Walsh with the DEA," she announced as she entered the examination room where Robert was preparing to poison Detective Rodriguez. "I have federal warrants for your arrest on charges of heroin trafficking, systematic jewelry fraud, money laundering, conspiracy to commit murder, and multiple counts of first-degree murder related to your systematic exploitation of gemological services for criminal fraud activities and drug-related elimination operations." Robert's reaction to the federal agent's intervention was a combination of gemological authority confusion and desperate attempts to maintain his professional credibility as he realized that law enforcement agencies at multiple levels had been investigating his drug activities and had connected them to systematic client murders and organized jewelry fraud. His carefully maintained reputation as a respected gemologist had failed to protect him from comprehensive investigation by agencies with expertise in drug-related crimes and luxury goods fraud. Special Agent Walsh, there must be some serious misunderstanding about legitimate gemological work and the complex authentication procedures involved in professional gem analysis that requires specialized equipment and advanced chemical testing methods, Robert said frantically while abandoning his plan to poison Detective Rodriguez and attempting to preserve some semblance of professional credibility, despite the overwhelming evidence against his criminal activities. "Well, I am a certified gemologist with 24 years of experience providing appraisal services for New York's most prestigious collectors and institutions. All of my gemological work complies with established professional standards and authentication procedures designed to ensure accurate valuations and client security." Detective Rodriguez looked absolutely shocked as she realized how close she had come to being murdered by the gemologist she had been investigating for jewelry fraud. Her white-collar crime investigation had not only exposed Robert's substitution and murder operation, but had also prevented her own death at the hands of a killer who had been using gemological services as cover for systematic elimination of clients and law enforcement threats. The comprehensive investigation that followed Robert's arrest revealed the full scope of his criminal enterprise and the sophisticated methods he had developed to exploit gemological expertise for systematic fraud and murder. Forensic analysis of Robert's gemological operations revealed extensive evidence of his fraud activities, including sophisticated equipment for creating synthetic gems, vast inventories of stolen authentic stones organized for black market sale, and detailed records showing coordination between gem substitution and client elimination schedules. His office contained weaponized gemological equipment, heroin trafficking documentation, and comprehensive files containing authentication records for millions of dollars worth of jewelry that had been subjected to systematic fraud. The investigation also uncovered Robert's connections to organized crime figures who had been coordinating international jewelry theft and drug trafficking operations, while using his gemological expertise to authenticate stolen gems and eliminate potential witnesses through sophisticated drug poisoning methods disguised as laboratory accidents. Most disturbing was the discovery of Robert's detailed knowledge of synthetic gem production and drug delivery systems, which he had used to develop increasingly sophisticated methods for creating undetectable gem substitutions while eliminating threats through gemological equipment that had been modified to deliver fatal doses of synthetic drugs. Robert Steinberg was ultimately convicted of 12 counts of first-degree murder, systematic jewelry fraud, heroin trafficking, money laundering, conspiracy to commit organized criminal enterprise activities, and numerous other charges related to his exploitation of gemological services for criminal fraud activities and drug-related elimination operations. The conviction sent unprecedented shockwaves throughout New York's jewelry and gemological community, prompting immediate reforms in gemologist licensing, authentication protocols, and drug addiction prevention measures designed to protect collectors from exploitation by trusted gemological professionals involved in organized criminal activities. Several other gemologists and jewelry appraisal specialists were investigated for similar criminal activities, resulting in enhanced oversight of gemological operations and new requirements for gem verification, synthetic detection, and client protection measures that made it more difficult for criminals to exploit gemological services for systematic fraud and murder. Detective Rodriguez and Special Agent Walsh received recognition for their collaborative investigation and became specialists in gemological crime investigation, developing new techniques for identifying fraud operations and protecting jewelry collectors from exploitation by criminal gemological professionals. Helena Rothschild and other surviving clients required extensive gem authentication and collection verification services to overcome the trauma of learning that their trusted gemologist had been systematically defrauding them and murdering clients while exploiting his gemological access for organized criminal activities. The gemological industry implemented comprehensive new safety protocols designed to protect clients from exploitation by unethical gemological providers. The case prompted comprehensive changes in gemological industry regulation, including mandatory background checks and drug testing for all certified gemologists, enhanced oversight of gem authentication and synthetic detection procedures, real-time monitoring of gemological equipment and testing methods, and new reporting procedures for suspicious gemological activities involving client security or potential fraud indicators. Robert's conviction also led to increased cooperation between gemological industry organizations and law enforcement agencies investigating organized crime, with new protocols designed to identify gemological services that might be exploiting their authentication access for systematic criminal activities while eliminating potential witnesses. The gemological and broader luxury goods industries implemented revolutionary new safety measures, including enhanced screening procedures for gemological professionals, comprehensive client protection programs, mandatory reporting of suspicious gemological activities, and improved training for recognizing signs of drug addiction and organized crime involvement among gemologists. 5 years after Robert's conviction and life imprisonment, New York's gemological community continued to implement safeguards designed to protect collectors from gemologists who might abuse their positions of trust and authentication expertise for criminal purposes. The gemologist, who had promised to authenticate precious stones and protect collectors' valuable investments, had instead used his gemological expertise and authentication access to commit systematic fraud and murder while exploiting clients' trust and vulnerability during their most precious jewelry transactions. However, his crimes had been thoroughly exposed, and his victims had found justice through the dedication of investigators who refused to accept drug-related deaths as mere addiction tragedies. Robert Steinberg's final setting had been permanently mounted in the prison system's maximum security facility, where he would serve multiple life sentences without possibility of parole, proving that even gemological professionals who attempted to exploit their authentication expertise for criminal gain could be identified, investigated, and brought to justice when dedicated law enforcement agencies worked together to protect innocent collectors from predatory gemologists. The jeweler's final setting had been crafted with the permanence of justice, serving as a lasting reminder that those entrusted with authenticating our most precious possessions must never abuse that sacred responsibility, and that gemological professionals who would exploit client trust and authentication access for criminal gain will ultimately face the full consequences of their betrayal of gemological integrity and collector trust. Thank you very much for listening. Please let us know what you think of this story in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any other videos.